It was a quiet evening, the kind where the stillness of the house feels like a warm blanket. Linda sat across from me at the dining table, her wine glass untouched, her eyes darting between mine and the flickering candlelight. Something was on her mind. I could feel it. After 12 years of marriage, you learn to read the subtle shifts in your partner's behavior. I just didn't realize how much of a shift this would be. Mike, she began, her voice soft but carrying that unmistakable edge of anticipation. I need to talk to you about something. I put down my fork, my appetite suddenly gone. Her tone wasn't accusatory or angry. It was nervous, almost like she was rehearsing lines from a script. Sure, I said, leaning back in my chair. What's up? She took a deep breath and gave me this small, almost shy smile. So, there's this guy from work. His name's Brad. We've been friends for a while, and well, he asked me to go out with him. Not in a serious way. Just, for fun. For a second, I thought I misheard her. You're joking, right? I said, chuckling nervously. No, Mike. It's not what you think. It's just a fun, harmless date. Like an experiment. Something to shake things up a bit. I stared at her, waiting for the punchline, waiting for her to burst into laughter and tell me it was all a joke. But she didn't. Instead, she reached across the table and placed her hand over mine, as if her touch could soften the impact of her words. Mike, I would never cheat on you, she said, her voice dripping with sincerity. This isn't about love or betrayal. It's just something I want to experience. Something new. You understand, don't you? I pulled my hand away, suddenly feeling cold. My mind raced as I tried to process what she was saying. You want to go on a date with another man, I said slowly, each word tasting bitter on my tongue. Yes, she said, almost pleading, but it's not what it sounds like. I love you. I don't want to look back one day and regret not exploring certain things. I thought, maybe, if we were open about it. I interrupted, my voice rising. You mean you want me to sit here, knowing you're out with some guy, and be okay with it? Linda flinched, but quickly regained her composure. It's just one night, Mike. One harmless night. And then it's over. I promise. I didn't respond. I couldn't. My mind was a storm of anger, confusion, and heartbreak. Linda took my silence as a sign to continue. Look, she said, leaning forward. I'll even text you while I'm out. I'll tell you everything. There won't be any secrets. It's just a fun date with another man. That's all. Please, Mike. You trust me, don't you? Trust. The word echoed in my head like a cruel joke. I'd trusted Linda with everything. My heart, my life, my future. And now she was asking me to trust her while she went off to explore with someone else? I stood up abruptly, the chair scraping loudly against the floor. I need some air, I muttered, grabbing my jacket. Mike, wait. Linda called after me, but I was already out the door, the cool night air hitting me like a slap. I walked aimlessly, my thoughts spiraling. How had we gotten here? Was our marriage so boring, so unfulfilling, that she needed to seek excitement elsewhere? And how could she possibly think I'd be okay with this? By the time I returned home, Linda was asleep, or at least pretending to be. I didn't bother waking her. Instead, I sat in the dark living room, staring at nothing, the weight of her words pressing down on me. The next day, she acted as if nothing had happened. She kissed me goodbye before heading to work, her smile as bright as ever. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental had shifted between us. And then, a week later, she dropped the bombshell. I'm going out tonight, she said casually over breakfast. With Brad. It wasn't a question. It wasn't a discussion. It was a statement, as if she'd already decided, as if my feelings didn't matter. I nodded slowly, my face a mask of indifference. Okay, I said, my voice calm. She looked surprised, almost relieved. Thank you, Mike. You're the best. I'll make it up to you, I promise. I didn't respond. I just watched as she finished her coffee, grabbed her purse, and walked out the door. That evening, as I sat alone in the house, a plan began to form in my mind. If Linda wanted excitement, I'd give it to her, but not in the way she expected. When she returned, her bags would be packed, waiting for her on the curb. And next to them, a set of papers she never thought she'd see. Linda left that evening dressed to the nines, her perfume lingering in the air long after the door clicked shut. I sat on the couch, staring at the spot where she had been just moments before. She had kissed my cheek on her way out, a casual, almost dismissive peck, as if this was just another regular night. But it wasn't. It was the night everything changed. I tried to focus on the TV, but nothing registered. My mind was a whirlwind of thoughts, each one darker than the last. How could she do this? How could she even think I'd be okay with her going out with another man? And not just any man, Brad. A guy she clearly had been growing close to behind my back. She called it harmless, but my gut told me otherwise. After an hour of pacing the living room, I decided to do something I hadn't done in years. I opened a bottle of scotch my dad had given me for our 10th anniversary, the one I'd been saving for a special occasion. If this wasn't special, though not in the way I'd hoped, I didn't know what was. As I sipped the burning liquid, my anger started to solidify into resolve. This wasn't going to be like those stories you hear where the husband sits around, crying, waiting for his wife to come home and explain herself. No, I was going to take control of this situation. She thought she held the cards, but she was about to learn otherwise. I spent the next few hours preparing. First, I gathered every piece of her clothing and personal belongings I could find and neatly packed them into suitcases. It was a surreal experience, folding her dresses and tucking away the shoes she had worn to our anniversary dinners. Each item felt like a piece of our history, now reduced to just stuff. When I finished, I dragged the bags out to the curb. It felt cathartic in a way, like I was physically removing the weight of her betrayal from my life. But I wasn't done yet. The divorce papers were next. I drafted them months ago, but never thought I'd actually need them. Linda had always been a little selfish, a little too focused on her own wants, but I never imagined she'd go this far. As I placed the papers on the coffee table, a part of me felt a pang of sadness. This was the woman I'd once planned to spend my life with, the woman I'd loved more than anything. But that woman didn't exist anymore, not in the way I thought she did. By the time Linda's car pulled into the driveway, it was well past midnight. I was sitting in the armchair by the window, the scotch bottle nearly empty beside me. My heart pounded as I watched her step out of the car, her heels clicking on the pavement. She was smiling, her phone clutched in one hand as she giggled at something, probably a text from Brad. The smile vanished the moment she saw her bags. She froze, her gaze darting from the suitcases to the front door, then back to the car as if she were considering just driving away. But after a moment, she squared her shoulders and marched inside. "Mike?" she called, her voice high-pitched and shaky. "What the hell is this?" I didn't move from my chair. "It's exactly what it looks like," I said, my tone calm, almost casual. She stormed into the living room, her face a mixture of confusion and fury. "Are you serious? You packed my things? What is this, some kind of joke?" I picked up the divorce papers and held them out to her. "Not a joke," I said. "Consider it the answer to your little fun date." Her eyes widened as she took the papers, her hands trembling. You can't be serious, Mike. You're overreacting. It was just one night. I told you it didn't mean anything." "And I told you I wasn't okay with it," I replied, standing up and meeting her gaze. "But you didn't care, did you? You went ahead and did it anyway. So now I'm doing what I need to do." Tears welled up in her eyes, but they didn't move me. "Not this time. You're throwing away 12 years of marriage over one stupid night?" I laughed bitterly. "No, Linda. You threw it away. The moment you decided your fun was more important than our marriage, you ended this. I'm just making it official." She stared at me, her lips trembling as she tried to form a response. But there was nothing she could say that would change my mind. "Where am I supposed to go?" she finally asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know," I said, shrugging. "That's not my problem anymore." Linda stood there for a moment, clutching the papers, her face a mask of disbelief. Then, without another word, she turned and walked out the door. I watched from the window as she loaded her bags into the car, her movements slow and hesitant. For a moment, I thought she might turn back, try one last time to convince me to forgive her. But she didn't. As her car disappeared down the street, I felt a strange mixture of emotions: relief, sadness, anger, and a tiny flicker of hope. This wasn't how I imagined my life would turn out, but maybe, just maybe, it was the start of something better. The silence in the house was deafening after Linda drove away. I stood by the window, staring out at the empty street, the taillights of her car now just a distant memory. For a moment, I felt a strange sense of victory, like I had taken control of my life in a way I hadn't before. But as the adrenaline faded, reality crept in. My marriage of 12 years had ended in a single night, and the emptiness that followed was unlike anything I had ever felt. I poured the last drop of scotch into my glass and sank into the armchair. My mind replayed the events of the evening like a bad movie, each scene more painful than the last. Her casual smile as she left for her fun date, the nerve it took to ask me to trust her while she went out with another man, the disbelief in her eyes when she saw her bags on the curb. It all felt surreal, like it had happened to someone else. The next morning, I woke up on the couch, the half-empty glass of scotch still on the coffee table. My head pounded, and my mouth felt like sandpaper, but none of it compared to the weight in my chest. The house was eerily quiet, and for the first time, I realized just how much of Linda was embedded in my daily life. Her perfume still lingered in the air, her favorite coffee mug sat on the kitchen counter, and the throw blanket she always used was draped over the couch. It was like she had left pieces of herself behind, ghosts of a life that no longer existed. I spent the day cleaning, not because the house was messy, but because I needed to do something, anything, to distract myself. I scrubbed the kitchen counters, vacuumed the floors, and even cleaned out the fridge, tossing out all the leftovers she had cooked. It wasn't until I reached the bedroom that I stopped in my tracks. The sight of our bed, still made up with the sheets we had picked out together, hit me like a punch to the gut. For a moment, I just stood there, staring, my hands trembling. I couldn't stay in that room. I grabbed my laptop and moved to the dining table, trying to focus on work, but my mind refused to cooperate. Every email, every spreadsheet, every task felt meaningless. How could I care about deadlines and meetings when my entire world had just fallen apart? By mid-afternoon, my phone buzzed. I hesitated before picking it up, half expecting it to be Linda, but it wasn't. It was a text from my friend Dan, asking if I wanted to grab a drink later. I almost said no, but then I realized the alternative was sitting at home, wallowing in my misery. So, I agreed. We met at a small bar downtown, the kind of place where the lights are dim, and the music is just loud enough to drown out your thoughts. Dan was already there when I arrived, a beer in hand and a concerned look on his face. "Mike," he said as I slid onto the stool next to him, "you look like hell." "Thanks," I said dryly, signaling the bartender for a drink. "That's exactly what I needed to hear." He chuckled, but his expression quickly turned serious. "All right, spill it. What's going on?" I hesitated, unsure of how to explain everything. But as soon as I started talking, the words came pouring out. I told him about Linda's fun date, her ridiculous explanation, and the look on her face when she saw her bags on the curb. Dan listened without interrupting, his brow furrowing deeper with each detail. When I finished, he let out a low whistle. "Man, that's rough. I don't even know what to say." "Yeah, join the club," I muttered, taking a long sip of my drink. "Look," he said after a moment, "I know it doesn't feel like it now, but you did the right thing. You deserve better than someone who would pull something like that." "Do I, though?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. 12 years, Dan. I thought we were happy. How did I miss this? Was I just blind? Or was I not enough for her? "Stop," he said firmly. "Don't do that to yourself. This isn't about you not being enough. This is about her not valuing what she had. And trust me, one day, she's going to realize she screwed up. Big time." I wanted to believe him, but the doubt gnawed at me. Could I really just move on, knowing that the woman I had loved, the woman I had built my life around, had treated our marriage like something disposable? As the night wore on, Dan did his best to cheer me up, telling stories about his own failed relationships and cracking jokes at Linda's expense. It helped, a little, but when I got home, the emptiness was still there, waiting for me like an unwelcome guest. I lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, my thoughts racing. Linda hadn't called or texted, and a part of me wondered where she was, what she was doing, and if she was with Brad. But another part of me knew it didn't matter. She had made her choice, and now I had to live with mine. The next morning, I woke to the sound of my phone vibrating against the nightstand. For a moment, I thought it might be my alarm, but when I opened my eyes, I saw Linda's name flashing on the screen. My stomach twisted into a knot as I stared at it, debating whether to answer. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to send her straight to voicemail, but another part, the part that still couldn't fully let go, wanted to know what she had to say. With a deep breath, I swiped to answer. "Hello? Mike," she said, her voice trembling. "We need to talk." I leaned back against the headboard, my free hand gripping the blanket. "About what?" "I think we said everything that needed to be said last night." "Mike, please," she pleaded. "Can we just meet? Face to face?" I need to explain." I let out a bitter laugh. "Explain? Linda, you already explained. You told me it was just a fun date. You told me I should trust you while you went off with another man. What else is there to say?" There was a long pause on the other end of the line, and for a moment, I thought she might have hung up. But then I heard her take a shaky breath. "I made a mistake," she said quietly. "I didn't think it through. I didn't realize how much it would hurt you." "You didn't realize?" I snapped, my voice rising. "Linda, how could you not realize? How could you think it was okay to even ask me something like that? Do you have any idea what it felt like, sitting here, knowing you were out with him?" "I wasn't thinking," she said, her voice breaking. I thought we were strong enough, that it wouldn't matter, that you'd understand." "Well, you thought wrong," I said coldly, "and now you're realizing the consequences." "Mike, please," she said again, her tone desperate. "I just want a chance to talk, to fix this. Can we meet? Just once. Please." I hesitated, torn between my anger and the small part of me that still wanted to hear her out. Finally, I sighed. "Fine. One meeting. But don't expect me to change my mind." "Thank you," she whispered. "Can we meet at the park? The one by the lake? This afternoon?" "Fine," I said again, then hung up without waiting for her to say anything else. The park was quiet when I arrived, the usual crowd of joggers and dog walkers noticeably absent. I parked the car and walked to the bench by the lake, the one where we used to sit together on lazy Sunday afternoons. It felt surreal to be there now, knowing what had happened, knowing what she had done. Linda was already there when I arrived, sitting on the bench with her hands clasped tightly in her lap. She looked up when she saw me, her eyes red and puffy, and for a moment, I felt a pang of sympathy. But then I remembered why we were here, and the feeling quickly evaporated. "You wanted to talk," I said, keeping my voice steady as I sat down at the far end of the bench. She nodded, her hands trembling. "Mike, I'm sorry. I know I hurt you. I know I made a terrible mistake. But I need you to understand, it wasn't about you. It was never about you." "Then what was it about?" I asked, my tone sharper than I intended. She looked down at her hands, her fingers twisting together nervously. "I don't know," she admitted. "I guess I felt stuck. Like our life was too predictable, too safe. I thought maybe if I did something different, something exciting, it would make me feel alive again." I stared at her, my jaw tightening. "So you decided to throw our marriage away for a thrill? For a night with some guy from work?" "It wasn't supposed to be like this," she said, her voice cracking. I thought it wouldn't mean anything, that it would be harmless. But I was wrong. I see that now. And I'm so sorry, Mike. Please, you have to believe me." I leaned forward, resting my elbows on my knees as I tried to process her words. "You keep saying you're sorry," I said after a moment. "But sorry doesn't change what you did. Sorry doesn't undo the fact that you put yourself first, that you didn't care how it would affect me." "I care," she said quickly. "I care more than you know. That's why I'm here, Mike. I want to make this right. I want to fix us." I let out a bitter laugh. "You think it's that easy? That you can just say you're sorry and everything will go back to the way it was?" "No," she said, her eyes filling with tears. "I know it's not easy. I know it's going to take time, but I'm willing to do whatever it takes, Mike. Please, just give me a chance. I looked at her, the woman I had loved for 12 years, the woman who had just shattered my trust. Part of me wanted to believe her, to hold on to the hope that we could somehow rebuild what we had. But another part, the part that had spent the last 2 days in agony, couldn't ignore the betrayal. I don't know if I can, I said quietly, my voice barely audible. I don't know if I can ever trust you again. Her face crumpled, and she reached out to touch my arm, but I pulled away. Mike, please, she begged. Don't say that. We can fix this. I'll prove it to you. I'll do whatever it takes. I stood up, my heart heavy. You had your chance, Linda, I said, my voice firm, and you blew it. I'm done. She stared up at me, her tears streaming down her face, but I didn't stay to watch. I turned and walked away, each step feeling like a weight being lifted off my shoulders. As I drove home, I felt a strange sense of clarity. For the first time in days, I knew what I had to do. It was time to move on, to start over. And no matter how hard it would be, I knew I couldn't let her drag me down again. I didn't sleep much that night. The conversation with Linda replayed in my mind like a broken record, each word cutting deeper than the last. Her pleas for forgiveness, her attempts to explain herself, it all felt hollow. She didn't regret what she'd done. She regretted the consequences. And that distinction was what made moving on so much easier to accept. The next morning, I woke up feeling lighter. It wasn't happiness, not yet, but there was a strange calm that settled over me. I'd made my decision, and for the first time in a long while, I felt like I had control over my life again. After my morning coffee, I grabbed a box from the garage and started packing away the remnants of her presence in the house. The pictures of us on vacations, her books stacked neatly on the shelves, even the small trinkets she collected over the years, all of it went into the box. It was therapeutic in a way, to reclaim my space. When I was done, I carried the box out to the garage, where it joined the luggage I hadn't seen her return for. I wasn't sure if she'd come back for any of it, or if she'd just disappear, leaving the memories of our life together behind. Either way, I didn't care anymore. I needed to move forward. Around noon, my phone buzzed again. It wasn't Linda this time. It was Dan. You holding up okay? He asked, his tone concerned but casual. I'm fine, I said, surprised by how true it felt. Actually, I'm better than I thought I'd be. That's good to hear, he said. Listen, a couple of us are getting together for a poker night tomorrow. You should come. Get your mind off things. I hesitated. The idea of being around people felt both appealing and exhausting, but I knew I couldn't keep isolating myself. Yeah, all right, I said. I'll be there. Good, Dan replied. And Mike, you're doing the right thing. Don't let her guilt you into thinking otherwise. I won't, I assured him, hanging up. The next evening, I walked into Dan's place to find the guys already seated around the poker table, laughing and joking like nothing in the world could faze them. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I belonged somewhere. The air was light, the beer cold, and for a few hours, I let myself forget about Linda and everything she put me through. But just as I was starting to relax, my phone buzzed again. I glanced at the screen and saw Linda's name. My chest tightened, but I ignored it, sliding the phone face down on the table. You all right? Dan asked, noticing the shift in my expression. Yeah, I said, forcing a smile. Just her again. I'll deal with it later. The night ended with more laughter than I'd had in years, and as I drove home, I realized something important. Life was still going on, even without Linda in it. I wasn't broken, and I wasn't alone. When I got home, I checked my phone to find a single message from her. Please, can we talk again? Just one more time. I stared at the text for a long moment before deleting it. I'd already made my decision. The next few days passed in relative peace. For the first time in what felt like forever, I wasn't consumed by thoughts of Linda or her betrayal. I focused on work, spent time with friends, and even started going for evening walks just to clear my head. Life was slowly beginning to feel normal again. At least, as normal as it could after everything that had happened. But, of course, Linda wasn't done. It started with phone calls, at first sporadic, then more frequent. I ignored them all, letting them go straight to voicemail. Her messages ranged from apologetic to frantic, each one more desperate than the last. "Mike, please, I just want to talk. I made a mistake, but we can fix this. Why won't you answer? Don't you think I deserve a chance to explain? Mike, I love you. I know I messed up, but I can't lose you. Please call me back." I didn't respond. Every time I heard her voice, it brought back the anger and hurt, and I refused to let myself get dragged back into that cycle. I had made my decision, and nothing she said was going to change that. Then came the texts. Dozens of them. Some were long-winded apologies, others were short bursts of panic, and a few were outright manipulative. "I can't believe you're doing this to me after everything we've been through. You're being cruel, Mike. At least talk to me. I deserve that much. I need to see you. Please, Mike. I'll do anything." It was exhausting. No matter how much I ignored her, she wouldn't stop. Finally, I decided to block her number. I thought that would be the end of it, but I underestimated just how determined Linda could be. A few days later, I came home from work to find her standing on my porch. She looked disheveled, her hair messy and her makeup smeared like she'd been crying. In her hands, she held a small bag, as if she thought she could waltz back into the house and everything would go back to the way it was. "Mike," she said as soon as she saw me, her voice cracking. "Please, can we talk? Just for a few minutes?" I stood there for a moment, staring at her. Part of me wanted to slam the door in her face, but another part, maybe the part that still remembered the good times we'd shared, felt a pang of pity. Against my better judgment, I stepped aside and let her in. She walked into the living room, looking around like she barely recognized the place. I had rearranged some furniture and taken down the photos of us, and I could see the realization dawning on her face that things were different now. "You've changed things," she said softly. "Yes," I replied bluntly. "Because things have changed, Linda." She sank onto the couch, clutching the bag in her lap like it was a lifeline. "Mike, I don't know how to say this, but I'm sorry. I really am. I know I hurt you, and I hate myself for it. I've been such an idiot. I didn't realize what I had until it was gone." I crossed my arms, leaning against the wall. "And what do you expect me to do with that, Linda? Forget everything? Pretend like it didn't happen?" "No," she said quickly, shaking her head. "I know I can't ask that of you, but I'm begging you, Mike. Please give me another chance. I'll do whatever it takes to make things right." Her words sounded sincere, but I'd heard it all before. The apologies, the promises, the tears. It was all part of a cycle I wasn't willing to repeat. "Linda," I said, my voice steady, "you made your choice. You prioritized your fun over our marriage, and now you're dealing with the consequences. I'm not going to put myself through this again." She started crying, big, heaving sobs that filled the room. "I love you, Mike," she choked out. "I know I messed up, but I can't lose you. Please, don't do this." I took a deep breath, forcing myself to stay calm. "You already lost me, Linda. The moment you decided I wasn't enough for you, you lost me." She looked up at me, her eyes red and swollen. "So that's it? 12 years, and you're just throwing it all away?" "No," I said firmly. "You threw it away. I'm just the one cleaning up the mess." Linda sat there for a long moment, her shoulders shaking as she cried. Finally, she stood up, clutching the bag tightly. "I don't know what I'm supposed to do now," she said quietly. "That's not my problem anymore," I replied, opening the door. "Goodbye, Linda." She hesitated, her eyes searching mine for any sign of softness, of forgiveness. But there was none. With a shaky breath, she walked out the door, and I closed it behind her, the sound echoing through the empty house. For the first time in weeks, I felt a sense of finality. It wasn't closure, not yet, but it was a step in the right direction. The days after Linda's visit were strangely quiet. No calls, no texts, no emails, just silence. It was a relief at first, but as the quiet stretched on, it began to feel unnerving. I couldn't shake the feeling that she was planning something, though I couldn't imagine what. Then, one evening, as I was settling into the couch with a book, there was a knock at the door. My stomach sank. I already knew it was her. When I opened the door, Linda stood there with a small box in her hands. She looked calmer this time, almost resigned. "Mike," she said softly, "I'm not here to fight. I just want to give you this." I stared at the box suspiciously. "What is it?" "It's everything," she said, her voice trembling. "Letters, photos, things I've kept over the years. Things that meant something to us. I thought maybe you'd want them. Or maybe you'd want to throw them away. I don't know." For a moment, I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to slam the door, but another part, a small, fragile part, felt a pang of nostalgia. "Fine," I said, taking the box. "But this doesn't change anything." "I know," she replied, her voice barely audible. "I just thought you should have it." She lingered for a moment, like she wanted to say something else, but instead, she turned and walked away. I watched her go, the box feeling heavier in my hands than it should have. That night, I sat at the dining table and opened the box. Inside were old Polaroids, handwritten notes, ticket stubs from concerts we'd attended, and other small tokens of our life together. Each item was like a time capsule, pulling me back to moments I had almost forgotten. One photo in particular caught my eye. It was from our honeymoon, the two of us smiling on a beach, arms wrapped around each other like we didn't have a care in the world. I stared at it for a long time, wondering how we had gone from that to this. But as I sifted through the box, the anger I had been holding onto began to fade. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was something close to peace. I didn't need these things anymore. They were pieces of a past that no longer defined me. The next morning, I took the box to the attic and left it there. Maybe one day, years from now, I'd look through it again. Or maybe I wouldn't. Either way, it was out of sight, and that was enough for now. Life always moves forward, even when it feels like the world has stopped. Even when the people you loved changed so much that you barely recognized them. It had been a few months since the last time I saw Linda. She stopped calling, stopped texting, stopped trying to reach out. Maybe she finally understood that some things couldn't be undone. Maybe she had moved on. And so had I. At first, it was hard. The quiet in the house felt unnatural, the empty space beside me in bed a constant reminder of what once was. But over time, I realized that what I was really mourning wasn't Linda. It was the future I had imagined for us, the life I thought we were building together. And once I let go of that, things became easier. I threw myself into work, reconnected with old friends, and even picked up a few new hobbies, things I had once put aside to make space for our marriage. It felt strange at first, rediscovering myself after so many years of being part of a couple. But as time passed, I started to enjoy it. I started to enjoy me. One evening, as I walked along the same park trail where Linda and I had our last conversation, I caught myself smiling. Not because I missed her, not because I was thinking about what we had lost, but because I realized something important. I was happy. Not in a dramatic, life-changing way, but in a quiet, steady way. The kind of happiness that comes from knowing you're exactly where you're supposed to be. Linda's choices had hurt me, but they had also forced me to rebuild myself. And in doing so, I had created something stronger, something better, something just for me. And that was a future worth looking forward to.